Chinese President Xi Jinping has made a pitch for a peaceful, stable and prosperous Afghanistan on the second day of talks with Taliban leaders. The talks being held in China also include representatives from regional nations such as Russia, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Iran and some others. It's being seen as an attempt by Beijing to play a leading role in the region while guiding the future of a country with strategic significance for itself and its neighbors. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but here's a quick look at what Xi Jinping said. I quote, "A peaceful, stable, developing and prosperous Afghanistan is the aspiration of all the Afghan people. It is also in the common interests of regional countries and the international community." And for more on this, I'm joined from Vienna by Velina Tchakarova. She's director of the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy and one of Europe's top experts when it comes to geopolitics involving China and Russia. Velina, I intend to look at both those countries in a moment, but first I'd like to drill down further into China's role in Afghanistan. What is China trying to do here with these latest talks?
So obviously, the things shifted towards China filling the geopolitical void left by the U.S. withdrawal last summer. And China is intending to do this in two particular tracks. On the one side, of course, by engaging with the Taliban. That means a political dimension where they need these direct talks. Let me remind you that even though that they do not still recognize the Taliban, they, of course, are politically dealing with them and did not actually leave the country following the takeover. The second, of course, track is the economic one. And here the goal is clear. China wants to incorporate Afghanistan into its broader geostrategic projects in the region, to link it to Pakistan. Pakistan has this Pakistan-China economic corridor. And in the next step, it will be also Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan. So here the incentive is clear. Already 62 billion were offered to the Taliban for various projects.
Now, most nations involved in these talks, Velina, particularly China, Russia and Pakistan, have concerns, especially to do with terrorism emanating from Afghan soil. How do they plan to address them with the Taliban?
Well, in two possible ways. The one, of course, direct, by offering them incentives, by incorporating Afghanistan into geo-economic projects. China also seeks to relaunch mining activities. They want to let the Taliban take care of the security problems. The indirect way, the second way, is by cooperating with the Central Asian countries and specifically by Russia. China will need Russia as a security provider on the ground, which is, by the way, happening. Russia also did not leave the country last summer, and in fact is kind of engaged in a modus vivendi with China to deal with the Afghanistan problem. It's a diplomatic boost for Moscow, but it's also a huge security boost for China to deal with these problems collectively, so jointly. So that means, of course, also using regional organizations such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to involve the Central Asian republics. And of course, they will engage with Pakistan. Pakistan has been offered a lot of economic incentives by both Russia and China. And of course, Pakistan has a direct influence on Afghanistan.
And of course, it is that close cooperation between Russia and China that we also want to look at, Velina, because foreign ministers of both these nations, Sergei Lavrov and Wang Yi, met on Wednesday and reaffirmed the no-limits partnership that their leaders had agreed to in February. Let's just quickly hear what Sergei Lavrov had to say during this meeting.
We are living through a very serious stage in the history of international relations. I am convinced that at the end of this stage, the international situation will be much clearer, and that we, together with you and with our sympathizers, will move toward a multipolar, just, democratic world order.
Velina, a just, democratic world order. Now, that's two adjectives that are sort of hard to reconcile with Russia's actions in Ukraine, aren't they? I mean, what is Sergei Lavrov saying here?
What Sergei Lavrov is implying is that Russia's war on Ukraine marks the beginning of Cold War 2.0. So now we are in a situation where the West versus the Dragon Bear bifurcation of the global affairs has become a reality. And of course, these centrifugal forces are now also involving all relevant regional actors, such as India, such as the Indo-Pacific nations, but also other parts of the world. For instance, think of this BRICS summit. That means also Latin American countries, African countries. And all of these regional players are right now kind of oscillating between the West on the one side. We saw 48 countries who introduced severe sanctions on Russia, isolated Russia following February 24th. But then again, we see a lot of countries which are not sticking to the sanctions, which try to somehow avoid this binary world they are facing. And this is what Lavrov is now actually implying. On the one side, obviously, China has sided with Russia. The Dragon Bear is a modus vivendi of systemic coordination and has been in the making since 2014 at least. That means following the first invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But now, of course, the masks are off. And here we talk also about ideological competition as well. That means also the way they understand and read international rules, norms, and also the way their understanding of governance is going to be shaped.
So speaking of Cold War 2.0, are you saying that there is no room, particularly in Asia, let's just talk about Asia, there's going to be no room in Asia or the Indo-Pacific for fence sitting? Countries are going to have to pick a side, is that what you're saying?
In the long run, right now we are in this so volatile transitionary period, which is linked to a lot of insecurity. There are so many critical uncertainties, right? So some countries like Australia, for instance, did take a side. This is what Australia did last year by entering a security and defense pact. And I argue that in the long run, a lot of regional players in the Indo-Pacific will be faced with the same dilemma of either or choices. Some countries like India are going to probably seek once again a very unique position in this rapidly shifting global order. So that does not necessarily mean only siding with the West, but I suppose that India will try to navigate carefully between these two emerging geopolitical blocks.
Velina, just briefly, where does that leave the United States? I only ask because the special representative of the United States is going to be part of a meeting with China, Russia and Pakistan today, ostensibly on Afghanistan, but I'm certain that Ukraine will also figure prominently here, won't it?
Exactly. This Troika format has been working. So that means this is one of the opportunities for the American and the Russian counterparts. But of course, the Chinese one will be also present to meet and discuss relevant issues of the international relations. And Ukraine will certainly be on the agenda, even though the Troika discusses actually Afghanistan. Let me also remind you that there's been a severe famine emerging in Afghanistan. So there is also a humanitarian crisis, and because of the severe second-order effects now emerging out of Russia's war on Ukraine, that means specifically wet exports to the Middle East and to North African countries, but also Asian countries, and one of these examples is Afghanistan. There will be certainly also a discussion on how to tackle the humanitarian crisis, and when it comes to Ukraine, I do not anticipate any kind of approximation of the position. So on one side, of course, United States is strongly behind Ukraine and is going to do everything possible to, of course, strengthen Ukraine's defense forces together with the European Union members and other transatlantic allies and partners. And on the other side, as I said, we are seeing this Dragon Bear modus vivendi in diplomatic, but also political, economic, and other issues.
Velina, we'll leave it there for the time being, but thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you.